Time to hit the waiver wire. Falcons, Colts, Patriots, and Saints will all be on a bye week 11. Taking a look at some targets with the waiver wire. Told you about Noah Brown. Boy, he is on a heater, connecting with C.J. Stroud on the hot Texans. Who else do we need to target this week? Let's hand it over to the guys at Fantasy Football Today, Jamie Eisenberg and Dave Richard.
Thank you, Tommy. It's going to be an interesting week on the waiver wire as we look to enhance our rosters heading into the stretch run for the fantasy playoffs. As Tommy alluded to, 4 teams on a bye. Let's show you some of the replacement options you might need, also some injuries to deal with as well. We'll start with the quarterback position. Here are the 4 quarterbacks that you'll be missing. Actually, it's more than 4 because we have a few tandem situations we have to deal with. 2 guys in Atlanta, 2 guys potentially in New England, 2 guys in New Orleans, depending on Derek Carr's injury. But as you see, not the most impressive list of #1 quarterbacks, but Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues, you might need to find some options in case these have been guys you have been starting. The injuries at the position. This is a little bit more troublesome. Jalen Hurts expected to play with the knee injury. We're hoping to get Matthew Stafford and Justin Fields back. We'll talk about Stafford in a second, show you where he stacks up as a potential waiver wire add. Derek Carr's on a bye. Don't have to worry about that shoulder problem. Deshaun Watson should play through the ankle injury. And we'll see about Baker Mayfield there with the thumb injury. I think you need some thumbs, Dave, to have good quarterback play. We got 3 that are dealing with some thumb injuries. All right, the quarterbacks we're looking to add here. Again, not the most impressive list, but we usually go with a threshold of under 65% rostered on our site. So take a look and see if maybe some other quarterbacks, Joshua Dobbs in particular, is still available on your waiver wire. But Love is the headliner, at least of this group, and more 2 quarterback and Superflex leagues. That's right, Aaron Rodgers is on the list because if he does come back in mid-December, probably week 15 against the Dolphins will be the target point. You might want to use him for that week 16 game against the Commanders if he's in fact looking like Aaron Rodgers. But Dave, let's talk about Jordan Love here because finally had a good game for the first time since week 3. Over 20 fantasy points against the Steelers, and he gets a great matchup against the Chargers this week. Any interest in 1 quarterback leagues or more just desperate deep league 2 QB Superflex type of format?
You're probably already starting Jordan Love if it's a Superflex or a 2 QB league because he's shown you that upside. And the 3 quarterbacks that didn't have at least 22 fantasy points against the Chargers, Aiden O'Connell, Tyson Bagent, Zach Wilson. I think Jordan Love's better than those guys. I think he's absolutely a great guy to add. And you could also add him now if you've got a quarterback that's on bye in week 13 or 14. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson's on that list. Justin Fields is on that list. Kyler Murray could be a top 12 quarterback by then. Sam Howell already is a top 12 quarterback. So this is a good time to go and find your replacement for him. All you need to do is go and see who they're playing in those weeks. And if you like the matchup, you add them now to your bench and stash them until you don't need them anymore. Week 15, cut them, get them out of there.
Quarterbacks that we're moving on from, again, this is more 1 quarterback league options for the most part because a lot of these guys in 2 quarterback leagues you want to roster. But Derek Carr, again, don't need to hold him on his bye with the shoulder injury. Will Levis, 1 great game, 2 stinkers. Don't need to worry about him heading into Jacksonville in week number 11. And Taylor Heineke, who knows if he'll be the starter in week 12 when the Falcons come off their bye after dealing with the hamstring injury, and who knows what Arthur Smith wants to do with his quarterback rotation. Let's go to the running backs, and this is a much more different group when we talk about the players who are missing. A lot of headliners not available to you in week 11 because of the bye weeks. No Bijan, no Taylor, no Ramondre, no Kamara. A lot of great starting options there, so get ready to find some replacements. The injuries that we're looking at the running back position, again, hopefully a few of these guys are going to play. Raheem Mostert, we expect him to be out there for the Dolphins. Devon Achane expected to return as well after being out for the last 4 games, so that's going to be exciting. Madison is in the concussion protocol. We'll talk about his replacement in a second. Kyron Williams, Khalil Herbert. Williams ineligible to play for at least 1 more week. Herbert should be able to go for this week. We'll find out about Dameon Pierce, which will impact another guy that we're talking about on the waiver wire as well. Let's show you the guys that we're talking about adding for this week. And there are 2 guys in particular that are probably going to be 2 of the most added players across the board for this week's waiver wire, and that's Ty Chandler for the Vikings and Devin Singletary for the Texans. Antonio Gibson has 5 catches 3 games in a row. Enrico Dowdle, a great stash candidate just in case he starts to get more work for the Cowboys. He outperformed Tony Pollard in the win against the Giants in week number 10. So Dave, we got Ty Chandler replacing an injured Alexander Madison, who's in the concussion protocol, and that's typically meant a player has to sit out the next week. We see what Chandler did here in week 10 against the Saints. 15 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown. He also had another long run called back. So Chandler, dream matchup, Dave, against the Broncos. How good is he going to be?
Well, if Alexander Mattison is out, he could be outstanding because he could be the only running back in this Minnesota Vikings backfield. Think about their offensive line. It's very good. Josh Dobbs, the fact that he runs, usually that leads to good efficiency from the running back that's there. And I think that there's a real huge opportunity for Tyson Chandler to be a top 15-ish type of running back in week number 11. The question is what happens moving forward when Alexander Mattison comes back. He's got no chance to be a top 15 guy. And he has no chance to be a top 15 guy if Alexander Mattison, look, I just said a different name just like you did, if he ends up being cleared before the game against Denver. So there's a lot of uncertainty here, but here's what I know. The Vikings have been looking to try and find somebody to work with Alexander Mattison. They acquired Cam Akers. He got hurt. Now it's Chandler's chance to go and be that 1B running back there. And I think in a 1B role, he could still be serviceable to fantasy managers as a number 3 running back rest of season.
I am curious to see what they do in terms of backing up Chandler this week. They brought back Myles Gaskin, but they've had Dwayne McBride sitting on their practice squad.
What about Kenny Nwangwu?
Or Kenny Nwangwu as well, yeah. So some options there just to keep an eye on it. But clearly Chandler has not done enough to get elevated to the second role until Akers had the Achilles injury. So this is his chance to prove himself, and we'll see if he does. In Houston, we had a huge game for Devin Singletary against the Bengals last week when he had 30 carries for 150 yards and a touchdown. We've been begging for a Houston running back to step up. Dameon Pierce has missed the last 2 games with an ankle injury. Is Devin Singletary the best running back in Houston moving forward? And let's just assume Pierce does not play in week 11 against the Cardinals. Would you start Devin Singletary in your fantasy leagues?
I would start Singletary if there is no Dameon Pierce because I would expect him to go ahead and get 15-plus touches. And this, I think the secret to his game last week against Cincinnati is the offensive line. We said for weeks when we were trying to sell Dameon Pierce as a buy low candidate on our podcast, and even here on CBS Sports HQ, that offensive line is going to round into shape. And it has. And I think that really made a difference for Devin Singletary. But I've got long-term concerns with him just like I do with Ty Chandler. As long as Dameon Pierce is out, you can start Devin Singletary as an RB2. He's earned it after this one game. But we do have a track record of him not playing great. How about 2 weeks ago when he played? He was the main running back. He did bupkis. And when Dameon Pierce comes back, I'm certain of it, the Texans are going to use 2 running backs pretty consistently. That offensive line should help him. And I think Devin Singletary will probably be the better of the 2 at this point. But really, it's going to be a close call neck and neck. I'm not even sure there'd be anything better than flex plays in non-PPR leagues once Dameon Pierce is healthy. So there is some long-term concern with Singletary, just like there is with Ty Chandler.
The nice thing with Chandler, the nice thing with Singletary, Chandler facing the team that allows the most fantasy points to opposing running backs, the Broncos. Singletary is facing the team that allows the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs in the Cardinals. So good matchup for both of these guys. The running backs that you're dropping for this week, again, moving on from if you need to, Zach Moss on a bye, clearly getting outplayed at this point, out-produced, out-touched, out-everything by Jonathan Taylor, so that's good. Dameon Pierce, again, he may get his job back, but hard to trust him based on the body work this season. Miles Sanders on a bad team playing behind Chuba Hubbard, no thank you. Jaleel McLaughlin, you're going to hold him as a handcuff to Javonte Williams. I get that, but Williams starting to dominate touches there for the Broncos. And Roshan Johnson headed to a 3-man committee now in Chicago with Khalil Herbert back. Unfortunately, Roshan did not take advantage of Herbert being out for the last 5 games. That went to Deontay Foreman. Wide receivers that we're talking about now and the guys that are going to be missing for this week because of a bye, again, not the most attractive list, but are still some headliners there. Drake London, Michael Pittman, and Chris Olave, the trio that you'll be missing the most. Michael Thomas probably going to miss some time with a knee injury, so hold on to Rashid Shaheed if you can through the bye week. The injuries at the position, hopefully Justin Jefferson comes back. We expect Waddle to play. Same thing with Keenan Allen. T. Higgins going to be out on Thursday night. That's the expectation. We'll see about Nico Collins and what that does for Noah Brown, who we'll talk about in a second. And some of these other wide receivers, more fill-in replacement options if you've been using them along the way. So the wide receivers to add this week, the headliner is Noah Brown coming off another big game, over 300 yards receiving in the last 2 weeks. Demario Douglas worth holding on his bye. You can take your choices of the Chargers guys. One, probably a little bit better, safer option now is Jalen Guyton. One more for the future, those Quentin Johnston. Brandon Cooks playing well for the Cowboys. Jaden Reed coming on for the Packers. And then a couple of Cardinals benefiting with Kyler Murray back. But Dave, Noah Brown, again, 325 yards receiving the last 2 weeks. Can we trust him, though, if Nico Collins does play?
Well, I want to give you the stats. Since Noah Brown came back from injury in week 6, with and without Nico Collins on the field. So this will include games where they both played and maybe Nico Collins was just getting a break and Noah Brown was playing with him. With Nico on the field, it's almost an 18% target per route run rate and 8.3 ADOT for Noah Brown. Not great stuff. It's okay. Without Nico Collins on the field, Browns played outside way more. 27% target per route run rate. And in ADOT, I had to double check this, 16.7, so almost double when there's no Nico Collins. It's almost like what we talked about with the running backs, with Ty Chandler and with Devin Singletary. Long-term concerns. As long as Nico Collins is out, I think Noah Brown can be fantastic. Fantasy managers should trust him right around wide receiver 2 range, maybe wide receiver 3. But when Nico Collins comes back, I'm really nervous that he could still be double-digit PPR fantasy points, but it could be more 12 to 13, which isn't bad, but certainly not what we've been getting in the last couple of weeks.
We'll find out if Nico Collins is able to play, but clearly a good situation for Noah Brown. And then in terms of Demario Douglas, just playing well of late, could be the #1 receiver for the Patriots moving forward, coming off a 14-point PPR day in Germany against the Colts. The wide receivers that we're dropping for this week, again, you don't have to move on from these guys. These are just some suggestions, but Christian Watson, boy, has it been a frustrating season for him. I just don't know if he's the best wide receiver for the Packers moving forward with the way Jaden Reed has been playing. Michael Thomas again on a bye, not going to be available probably for week 12 and beyond. We don't know how long that knee injury will keep him out. And Josh Reynolds has been miserable the last several weeks. Not someone you want to trust. Tight ends on a bye. The headliners are probably the 2 from the Falcons along with Taysom Hill. Not going to have the services of one of the best do-it-all threats from what Taysom Hill's been dealing the last couple weeks. Injuries that we're looking at here, the big one is from Dallas Goedert in terms of new injuries, dealing with a forearm problem. Probably not going to play this week, but something to keep an eye on. The Eagles still have the option to put him on IR. The tight ends that we're looking to add for this week, the headliners, Logan Thomas. Dave, gave me 30 seconds about Logan Thomas. Can you still trust him as a starter against the Giants?
Low-end starter, 9 or more PPR points in 3 of his past 4 games. We've seen Tyler Conklin produce higher numbers than that, so I would prefer Conklin, but Logan Thomas still somebody who fantasy managers could go with as a streamer.
He's given you solid production, but maybe Conklin could be the better of the 2 if you're looking for a higher-end play. And the tight ends to drop, you can drop both Falcons guys. Look, I don't want to drop Kyle Pitts, but if you have to make a roster move, it's not like Pitts has justified holding on to him. 1 touchdown so far this season. So yeah, time to move on to Kyle Pitts. Don't move on from our podcast. It's the best podcast in the business, the Fantasy Football Today podcast. Wherever podcasts are found, you go check us out on our YouTube page as well. We help you dominate your leagues better than anybody else. The Fantasy Football Today podcast.